Hello class and welcome to the final lesson for social studies. Please on the top of your page write social studies 8th 10.9 for lesson 9 unit 10, and today we'll be talking about the end of the Reconstruction era. And then with always with the yellow highlighter, please write these down as these will be the answer to your question. So with the Reconstruction era, we talked about obviously Grant and his benefits to the administration. However, because of the abuses and scandals, the Republicans were falling out of favor with Northern voters, and they had no support from the South. So for the election of 1876, it was going to be a close one. So the South was going to full voting strength and likely to support the Democrat candidate. So the Republicans chose Rutherford B. Hayes as their candidate, and he was a courageous soldier of the Union Army during the Civil War, and he was also known as being competent, but mostly he was an honest leader. And after the scandals of the Grant administration, the Republicans knew that they had to rebuild trust in their party and leadership. And then the Democrats, they were resurgent in the country, and they were getting southern states back into the Union, and they would be straightened for that party. So, however, a financial panic in the 1873 has caused people to be angry with the Republicans who were in power, and so the Democrats had won control of the House of Representatives in the 1874, and they had chosen Samuel J. Tilden, the governor of New York, as their candidate for the presidency of 1876. So the election result were pretty much a close call. Tilden had won the important electoral votes in New York, but Hayes swept the West at that time, and to gain a majority of the electoral college required 185 electoral votes. So Tilden led with 185 electoral votes, and Hayes had won 169. So an electoral commission was established, made for 5 senators, 5 representatives, and 5 Supreme Court justices. Each party had 7 members, and 1 commissioner was an independent, and apparently someone tried to bribe the independent and he resigned. His replacement was a Republican. When commission voted, the result was predictable. The Republicans won the vote 8 out of 7. All electoral votes of the 3 states went to Hayes, and he was named the winner of that election. So, compromise of 1877. Behind the scenes, the Democrats were working on a compromise that approached Republican leaders and Hayes himself with a deal. They would allow Hayes to become president and not oppose the commission's result if Hayes was support a Texas of the Pacific Railroad and the military occupation of the South and give some Republican office to Southerners. Hayes would agree to these terms and become president. This agreement settled 4 months after the presidential election and became known as the Compromise of the 1877. This agreement was considered the nation's last sectional compromise. By agreeing to this compromise, the Republicans had kept office of the president. However, they were abandoning the blacks of the South, and many gained that blacks had made the terms of citizens, and equally would be lost in subsequent years. When troops were removed from the South in 1877, many things in the Southern society reverted to their pre-war status. And then Jim Crow laws and segregation from the military occupation of 1877 until 1965. Southern governments enacted many Jim Crow laws named the Jim Crow, was offensive name for black men, and the Jim Crow laws were designed to segregate the blacks from the whites. Southern states passed laws that provided separate schools, restaurant, theaters, and trolleys for black and whites. Often the blacks' facilities were inferior to those for whites, and public schools in the black neighborhoods often had no school books, no playgrounds, and sometimes no teachers. And other Jim Crow laws were designed to keep blacks from voting by keeping African Americans from the polls. Politicians could not be elected who sympathized with their situations. And these residency requirements were discriminatory because blacks were forced to move frequently. And some laws where citizens were able to pass a reading test before they could register to vote, and the black population had a high literacy rate, therefore literacy tests were discriminatory. And then in the Texan Constitution, we talk about it was written and approved in 1876, and with the transcripts of the black population had a high literacy rate, and these legal means were segregated blacks, and they were not only in ways of segregation was practiced, even sports and entertainment were also defended in racial barriers at this time period. And that is it for the end of the Reconstruction, guys. Thank you for tuning in.